I'm Marco Casalaina. I'm VP Products of Azure AI.
I'm Aarthy Longino, Group Product Manager in Azure AI.
And we are going to have a look at what's new. Well, for those of you who have been paying attention, OpenAI, just about a week and a half ago, had their Dev Day, and they made a number of announcements. And of course, the advancements that they have been making will be coming soon to the Azure OpenAI Service. That includes DALL-E 3 will be available as an API. GPT-4 Turbo will be available starting next week for you. In a few weeks, GPT-4 Turbo with Vision will become available as well, in public preview, I should say. And then in the first quarter of 2024, the new Assistance API and fine-tuning for GPT-4. So that's lots of stuff coming our way. One of the things we're going to have a look at today is the Azure AI Studio. Aarthy, what's that about?
Yeah, Azure AI Studio is the new studio that you've probably heard about if you've been paying close attention to yesterday's keynote, today's keynote. It is the place where you can leverage the host of Azure AI services plus Azure OpenAI to build solutions. So previously, we had multiple studios to do different things. Azure AI Studio makes it really easy to do these things faster and more seamlessly, and we're going to walk you through it today in our session.
All right. Well, we have thousands of customers that are using the plethora of Azure AI services today. You know, CallMiner uses Azure AI to do post-call analysis for contact centers. H&R Block is using Azure AI's document intelligence to recognize documents regarding taxes and things like that. And, well, Commerce Bank, we're going to see Commerce Bank today because their use case, well, that's something else. You'll see that for yourself. One thing we have heard from customers, though, is with the advent of generative AI, they've been concerned that it might generate something that's protected content, like copyrighted text or code that's coming from a repo, an open source repo with the GPL. Aarthy, what are we doing about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we take this seriously. And back in September, Brad Smith announced the Copilot copyright commitment, which is a new benefit to defend commercial customers from copyright claims. We're now extending that to broaden the commitment to cover Azure OpenAI Service. And again, later in our session, we're going to show you some of the tools that are going to help you build these solutions with confidence.
All right. Well, what are we going to stand here doing slides, or are we going to actually see this thing?
We're going to show you guys.
All right. Let's get right to it. Because that was our last slide, by the way. For the rest of this thing, we are all live all the time with Azure AI. And so now you see on the screen, well, it's the same slide deck, but I don't always do slides. But when I do, I prefer to use AI. And so here I have PowerPoint Copilot. And with PowerPoint Copilot, it has these special powers. Like I can make an entire slide deck, or I can, say, add a slide about Azure Content Safety. Today's presentation, by the way, has three main themes. The first one is ubiquity, and this Copilot here is an example of that ubiquity. As we have been saying all throughout Ignite, AI will be everywhere you look. So ubiquity, multimodality, and autonomy. And we're going to show you examples of all of these things. Now, in terms of the images on this slide, well, to make these images, of course, I used DALL-E 3. And you all can use DALL-E 3 even right this minute in Bing Image Creator. Bing Image Creator was upgraded to DALL-E 3 about 3 weeks ago. One of the attributes of DALL-E 3 that differentiates itself from its predecessors is that it's much better at words. And so here I made an airplane with Azure AI on the side. And if I had tried to do that with previous versions of DALL-E, I would have gotten a jumble mess of letters. But now it really does say Azure AI. Now, it's not perfect, like Azure AI over here. But, you know, it gets the job done. And for a lot of the other images that were in the few slides that we had, these did indeed come from DALL-E 3 that I did in Bing Image Creator. You see here all my robots say robot. Now, another aspect of ubiquity is this. M365 Copilot. And so here in M365 Copilot, now this is, well, behind the scenes, this is in fact GPT. But it's grounded to all of this data. It's grounded to my emails, my Teams messages, recorded meetings, and documents. And so I ask it here, what am I doing in this session, BRK202H? And it tells me all about it, what it's called, the fact that Aarthy and I are doing it together, and all of these things. And here we can see, and you'll find this across Microsoft things, the references. And so it's telling me where it got this information from, which in this case was this PowerPoint deck and these various documents. So that's what it's grounding to. Now, Aarthy, how do we do this stuff? Like, how do we actually build these copilots?
Yeah, so let's take a look at Azure AI Studio here. And I've created a project already. And what we're going to show you today is the ability to create a custom chat solution grounded in your data.
Give it 1 second. Oh, there we go. They've switched the screen. All right.
Awesome.
You're good.
All right, so this is a pretty common scenario that is really powerful, right? Where you can leverage foundation models like GPT-3.5, GPT-4, and ground it with your data to be able to deliver real comprehensive solutions that are what really customers are looking for these days, anytime they go anywhere. So here's the Contoso Outdoor Company website. These beautiful images are generated with DALL-E 3, pretty photorealistic. So this is a standard retailer website that has product catalog information, really. So this is unstructured data. And what we're able to do is, with just a few clicks, be able to start grounding the model and creating a customized solution. But what's interesting here is the integration with Azure Cognitive Search. And what we're going to show you today is the latest in Azure Cognitive Search, including vector search, which really helps us deliver on the future of NL being the new UI. So what I have here, and this is an expected error, so this we've prepared this a little bit, is just simple keyword search that I've grounded my data, set it to keyword search, and I can ask questions. I know I can ask questions like, what is the price of a particular product, and that's going to work, right? But what we see as, NL is the new UI is customers asking questions like, what backpack should I buy for extreme cold? And this information, if I go into reading about the backpacks, the terminology extreme cold is not listed in the product catalog. This is where semantic search comes in. So if I go in, again, with just a couple of clicks, I can enable semantic search. So semantic search leverages language understanding and re-ranking to provide more relevant results. So if we ask the same question here, what backpack should I buy for extreme cold? With semantic search, that is not what is supposed to come back.
Well, live demos, folks.
Live
this is why we do it live.
Yes.
It's real.
What it should recommend is one of these backpacks. Oh, Azure Cognitive Search. All right, so it's been working for 4 days. A cognitive search team can help us out here. So anyway, what does come back is a clear recommendation for a backpack with a reference to where we pulled the data from. So similar to where Marco showed in the Copilot, where you have citations and you can see, okay, yeah, this is how it derived at this answer. We have that same information that comes back.
All right, let's see what happens if we turn on vector search.
All right, so we're going to try it with vector search here. So vector search really is the latest in Azure Cognitive Search, which again is rebranded to Azure AI Search. So I'm going to try to say that moving forward. But it has a much better understanding of concepts and meaning. So I'm able to ask things like, for example, what boots are light as a feather, right? The term light as a feather is not something that is in a product catalog, but it is the way that humans speak to each other.
Oh,
all right. Okay, so you guys are getting the real demo.
Demo fail, yes. Okay.
That's okay. But you know what? You can take my word for it for now.
Well, you know what we can do,
see.
though, actually. So this is not the interface that a real person would actually see, right? I mean, somebody who is an end user of this thing would not be working in here anyway. This is the administrative interface. Let's show them what it would look like for a real user.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had, broad application of this technology across various industries and public sector. We had a recent, pretty prominent announcement by the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, who was talking about how the city of New York is embracing generative AI. And they built this solution, chat.nyc.gov. You should be able to try this, and I think you won't hit the 402 that I just hit earlier on the other thing. But this is making it easy for citizens in this case be able to get answers, comprehensive answers to questions that they would call up the city for, right? So this is where you can see the citations, their supporting references, and just various broad application, really powerful stuff.
Yeah, so this is really the real live thing. And this is what it really looks like. And since you got the translate window in here, I think you got a translate window in here, let's call an audible here. Go back to the My City thing.
Yep.
And why don't you copy out that text, and why don't we ask, how do you start a bakery in Manhattan.
Let's do it,
in
yeah.
Spanish. So one of the advantages of vector search is that it is a concept search. So it doesn't really matter what words you use because it's not a keyword match. And that one of the advantages of it is that then you can ask a question in any language, and if all goes well, this should work. Oh, well, it answers us in Spanish, but it didn't find specifically the bakery. All right, well, we're full of fail today.
Yeah.
All right.
But I will point out one thing. So, you know, we didn't have to prime the system here, and I wish we could show you this in Azure AI Studio, but you're able to, once you have a solution that is grounded in English data, be able to pass in these questions without having to do anything else, right? So it's backed by Azure translation services, and it just will work.
It works in any language. All right, now, up to this point, we have been treating AI as if it's a text-in, text-out operation. As if you type to it, and it types to you, but already that's not true. So here I am on Power BI. Oh, wait, I forgot the, yeah, okay, I forgot, well.
Keep going.
All right, well, here I am in Power BI. And we're looking at this screen right here, and I've been at Microsoft for like a year and a half. And so I haven't really mastered Power BI. So one thing I can do now with this multimodal model, GPT-4 Turbo with vision, it's quite a mouthful, is I can feed it a picture of the screen, and it can see what I see. And so I can ask it a question about the screen, like, how do I filter this just to Canada? And it will tell me how to do this based on what I'm seeing over here.
So, Marco, this is pretty powerful. Microsoft is committed to developing and serving accessible solutions in many different contexts. I know that you have a slight vision impairment. Can you talk a little bit about how this is helping you?
I do, in fact, have a mild vision impairment, and that is that I am red-green colorblind. So the other day, I happened upon this infographic here, which ironically is talking about the visual complexity of Coca-Cola advertisements and the use of color. And in so doing, they've rendered this thing which I can't really see. I can't differentiate which line is which in this image. And so I can ask the model, though, how did the use of color change, and give it this image. And it gives me this pretty good explanation over here about how the use of color has changed, that it rose from the 1880s to the 1950s, and then it started to decline. And I guess that's one of these lines over here. I don't know, maybe you can see it.
Yeah, no, that looks right to me. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. So that's pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, this is really neat. And but I think both of the examples you've shown us is charts or graphs. What about real world object understanding? How does the model do with that?
Well, since you ask, I have this giant stapler over here. And so I was at my daughter's school, and I was at the principal's office, and I was called upon to reload this giant stapler, which I could not figure out. And so I took a picture of it, and I asked the model, how do I reload this? And of course, it knows what this is. It even knows that it's a swing line stapler, and it could give me instructions on how to reload this swing line stapler. So, maybe, because I had forgotten to do this, maybe we can go back to where we were, if that's all right. Because once you start putting this stuff together, the question is, New York City had put this together with one data source.
Right.
So they had the one data source, which is their document set.
Yep.
Now, what if I wanted to make it more complicated? What if I wanted something with multiple document sets, multiple sources? What would we do there?
Yeah, so this is something that we hear a lot from customers, and in Azure AI Studio, we've made it a lot easier. So these are pre-built solutions. So things that I was trying to show you here in the playground, these are pre-built solutions for adding your data. But if you would like to customize just even a little bit more, all you have to do is click on Open and Prompt Flow, which will take you here. Prompt Flow is a tool that helps you visualize what's really going on in the LLM. And what we've done here that is, I think, pretty novel is open back the curtains on the meta prompt, right? You can look at, for every step, what is the input, what is the result, and really provides developers with more insight and empowers them to be able to make changes quickly to build the experiences that you want. And then from here, making it really easy to evaluate and deploy. And I'll show you one thing here. So Marco, you mentioned multiple data sources.
Right.
So previously, this was pretty difficult. But however, in prompt flow, you can see here, we have an extra node, retrieve customer info, where we've connected in customer info along with product info. So if I'm Contoso Outdoor Company, and I've built this product info chatbot, and I know that I want to go build something that's more internal facing that will allow me to ask questions on customers and product data together, we've made it really easy to connect this. So I can ask questions like, how many Trail Walker hiking boots did Daniel Wilson buy? And it'll come back with an answer.
Okay,
So,
but now if you are putting this into production, how do you make sure that this does what you want it to do? How do you evaluate it to ensure that it's saying the right things, that it doesn't go off the rails? How do you do that?
Yeah, so this is yet another thing where we really try to hear our customers of like, can you guys make this easier? And right here in prompt flow, there's now a button for evaluation. I'm going to click on built-in evaluation, and I have that preloaded here because it just takes a second to run. And you're able to now select from a variety of metrics. I have 3 industry standard metrics here: groundedness, relevance, retrieval score, and select a model and get an evaluation result that will show you a visual representation of how we did on each of these, as well as be able to look in more detail in your data set what exactly came back for each case.
So yeah, what is that? I see groundedness, relevant. What does a retrieval score mean?
Yeah, so retrieval score is interesting, right? It helps us understand if we are properly retrieving data from the input source. So things that we'd expect the model to be able to answer from the input data, we want that to be coming from there. But if I ask a question like, I don't know, how many points did LeBron score in the last game? We should not be trying to pull that data from that, or we shouldn't be answering that question from the product catalog information, right? And so this is where that becomes a lot more insightful, and you can see exactly how we arrived at that.
All right, so one last thing. We got to talk about content safety. You know, how do we make sure that these things, that this model doesn't say something it's not supposed to say, and how do we actually make that copyright commitment work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the copyright commitment that we talked about at the start of the presentation, you can see here, we'll start with this, the content filters. So this is really giving you more flexibility and power where we provide you the ability to tune up both the user prompt, the input, as well as the completions on the output. So if you think back to the New York City example, right? So one of the solutions that they might be looking to implement is having an easy way for citizens to report crimes, right? Or ask questions about what to do in a specific case, where you would want that input to come through, right? You want people to be able to ask those questions, but the way that the model responds is something that you want to be able to dial back, not necessarily answer in that same language. So we've made that easier with these content filters. And then going next to the copyright protection, we also, along with jailbreak and material detection, have made it really easy to be able to try to identify places where these copyright infringements might be at risk.
All right, so this is a full suite of tools to be able to ground these models to your data, to test them, and ensure that they stay on the rails. Now, earlier, I mentioned that one of the customers we were going to take a look at today is Commerce Bank. And so to that end, I would like to welcome to the stage Gerald Ertl from Commerce Bank. Gerald, welcome. And not just you, Gerald, but also Eva.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marco.
Can you tell us a little bit about Commerce Bank and what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Commerzbank is one of the leading banks in Germany, and we are continuously working to improve our banking and our customer interface. And therefore, we are pretty excited to present the first test version of our new Commerzbank banking avatar today in Seattle. This avatar will significantly simplify banking in future. It is based on Microsoft Generative AI in combination with Microsoft Azure technology, exactly the new avatar technology. And this magic combination of 2 groundbreaking technologies enabling our mobile banking app a complete new cutting-edge customer experience. But now, let's speak with our avatar and see what happens.
All right,
Marco,
let's go try this thing. Come on over here. All right, I'm gonna try it first, if that's all right. All right. Hi, Ava, this is Marco. What can you do?
I hope you are enjoying Ignite, Marco. I am Ava, your Commerce Bank avatar. I am an expert on our retail banking products. I can help answer any questions you may have about our services and products.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and lob a banking question at her. Let's see. I'm in Seattle for a special event. Does my Commerce Bank Premium card include travel insurance?
𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, I'm glad you asked. Yes, our premium credit cards include international travel insurance. You can rest easy knowing that you are protected during your travels.
All right. Well, that sounds like it's a good thing. You want to give it a shot?
Yeah.
Oh, step right up.
Hi, Eva. It's Gerald. Can you answer questions in German as well?
Hallo Gerrit. Ja, ich kann auf Deutsch antworten. Bitte stelle mir deine Frage und ich werde mein Bestes geben, sie so gut wie möglich zu beantworten.
Kannst du mir sagen, wo sich die Zentrale der Commerzbank befindet?
Die Zentrale der Commerzbank befindet sich in Frankfurt am Main, Deutschland.
Eva, I do have one last question.
Of course, happy to help. What's your question?
People say fortune comes overnight. Does that mean I have to sleep more to get rich?
While getting a good night's sleep is important for overall health and well-being, and can even improve productivity, unfortunately, it is not a guaranteed recipe for success or wealth. Building wealth often takes hard work, discipline, and smart financial planning.
Thank you very much, Eva, for your help, and goodbye.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your previous message. Can you
Told
please
you it was
clarify?
live.
And
You
before
think
you
we
go,
record
I
these
hope you
things,
have a
but
great time
no,
remaining
not
at
Azure
Ignite.
AI. All right, so this is the real deal. And what this really is, by the way, is it's kind of a three-layer thing. At the bottom is a grounded GPT model. Commerzbank grounds this on their data, and it can talk about those kinds of things. Above that is one of our voices. This is one of our multilingual voices that can speak like 15 different languages natively, including German and some others. And on top of that is this avatar that you see on the screen. So this is one of the innovations that we're announcing here at Ignite, but there is another one. Gerald, how's your French? You speak French?
Not really good.
I heard him speak German. He doesn't speak French. Well, about an hour ago, and I kind of changed this demo at the last minute because I got to show this thing. About an hour ago, we were taking a look at the new personal voice. And so we're sitting in the room over there, and I said, hey, Gerald, can you record this statement? So he recorded this statement right here. It's about...
Ich, Gerald Ertl, bin mir bewusst, dass Aufnahmen meiner Stimme von Commerzbank verwendet werden, um eine synthetische Version meiner Stimme zu erstellen und zu verwenden.
So that was a consent statement that Gerald recorded. How long was it? About 10 seconds, I'd say?
10 seconds, not more.
And with that, with personal voice, well, now, guess what?
Avez-vous d'autres questions ou d'autres demandes à faire, monsieur?
That's you speaking French.
Yeah, and
Just like that.
And not only French, I can also speak Mandarin.
It's true. I made him speak. There's all these languages over here. Yeah, I made him speak all these different languages over here. You want to speak some Mandarin?
Yeah,
Can you do it?
Not really, but now.
好的，如果你需要我，请告诉我。
I hope whatever that said was nice. Anyway, I don't know what that said. So this is our new personal voice. And with 10 to 15 seconds or so, it is able to clone your voice and allow you to speak other languages. Now, one thing I should mention before we move on here is that both the avatar and the personal voice are in our limited access program. And so that means that you can't just use it willy-nilly because there are responsible AI concerns with this. So you do have to attest and tell us what your use case is and attest that you are using this responsibly. Furthermore, for any audio or video content, we require the consent. So, Gerald, you had to record your consent.
Absolutely.
And so that's true of anybody using these things. So we take responsible AI very seriously here. And so we want to make sure that people are using this responsibly. All right, Gerald, thank you so much for joining us. All right. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. And so now we're going to get to the last chapter of this presentation, and that is autonomy. So if you would please switch. There we go. We have it on Aarthy's screen now. So we got the spreadsheet. I give you the spreadsheet, Aarthy, and it's got a bunch of retail, like purchase data in it. You mind running some analyses of this stuff?
Sure. So this happens a lot, right? You're like, and this happens sort of, oh man, we need this data, right now. How do all I have is a dump of all of this data in an Excel file, or and it's just how can I quickly arrive at an answer? Well, Code Interpreter, which is an OpenAI plugin, is now available in Azure OpenAI Studio. So I can easily, with just one prompt here, all I did was point it to this outdoor sales CSV. I can ask a question like, what are the top 3 items sold in January? And I didn't have to go in and play with pivot tables or any of that. And I'm able to get back an answer. So. And it tells me what it's doing throughout the process. So this is...
And what is it doing? I mean, what is this thing actually doing?
Yeah, so Code Interpreter is super powerful, right? It is code execution. It's first telling you what is the code, executing the code, evaluating the results, and then returning an answer. So this came back with sleeping bag, 482 units sold, and then just be able to, again, like the idea of the citation that we showed you in the studio exists here as well, where you can look at how the Python code ran and step-by-step how it was able to arrive at this answer.
Right. Now what this really is, I mean, Code Interpreter is just the first of the assistants. So we talk about the Assistants API, and Code Interpreter, as Aarthy said, has the ability to write Python code, but also to execute that code and evaluate the execution of that code. Going forward, the Assistants API is effectively an autonomous, self-orchestrated system. Here, it's autonomous and self-orchestrated in the sense that you ask it a question like this, and it goes and figures out whatever code it needs to get to that answer. And sometimes it makes mistakes, and it goes back and corrects those mistakes. And sometimes it hits a point where it needs your input, and it says, hey, do you want me to do this by first name and last name or by email or whatever? But this is the first of the assistants. And I think this will come to characterize 2024, is this new kind of autonomous self-orchestrating system. Now, one company that is kind of taking this to an extreme already is UiPath. UiPath is built on Azure AI. And they have built this tool called Autopilot. And so what you may not know is we're taking this show on the road. So we have these Envision tours all over the world. And with UiPath, I read the screen here. I actually read the screen, and it read the screen, and it says, okay, which one of these events can I go to? Now, UiPath is also able to automate other applications. In this case, Microsoft Outlook. It looks in my calendar, and it compares this to my calendar and says, you can go to Mumbai. I actually do want to go to Mumbai and join that event. So I give it my passport. And I say, is my passport valid for this thing? And it's going to say, yeah, your passport is valid, but you need a visa. Now, at Microsoft, to request a visa, we have to go to the ServiceNow system and file a ticket. But UiPath can automate that too. And so using this conversation and the information that I got from my passport and from this website, it's able to pre-fill a ServiceNow ticket, which I can then file with ServiceNow and get approved. And I hope to see at least some of you in Mumbai.
I'll try to be there.
Yeah. So that is automation at an extreme. But like I said, this is going to be the future of AI. You think of these large language models, and today, everybody's kind of using them for search or search-adjacent use cases. And that's pretty cool. They could do some great stuff like M365 Copilot and Commerzbank does. But in the future, this AI, in the very near future, it's going to be able to do stuff instead. All right, let's finish this up and take it back to the slides, and then we'll take a couple of questions. All right, Aarthy, tell them about some session resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you all know, stuff is changing super fast in this space. We are constantly updating our blogs, sharing customer stories. And so here's some links where you can stay in the know and keep up with stuff that's just moving at lightning speed.
All right. And if you don't mind, stand up, 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗶cie. 𝗦𝗽𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 the chat.nyc.gov, and he has written a book about it. It's full of fun characters with a plot twist at the end. It's called Generative AI in action. And by using this QR code, you can get a 45% discount on this book. So I do recommend it. Also, if you are looking to migrate to Azure, there are lots of resources and experts available to you, and that is available at this link and this QR code. And with that, well, we have a few minutes left, and so we're going to open it up to questions. We have a few questions, so if you do want to ask questions, there are these QR codes along the side here, and so you can submit them in there. We actually have a number of them already queued up on the screen here, and we're going to go ahead and start taking them right now. So, Aarthy, what do you think about this first one? Will OpenAI model deployments be moved to the new Azure AI Studio?
Yeah, so this is a process. We definitely see Azure AI Studio as the future, the one place where you can get everything done. With that said, the existing studios, we do want to support our customers that are using those tools and have taken dependencies on those things. But the future is Azure AI Studio, so you'll be in good hands if that's where you're doing most of your development work moving forward.
All right. And I guess by that same token, we have another question with a similar theme. Is the prompt flow functionality being removed out of AML Studio into AI Studio? Are these two products being merged into one? And I'll take this one myself. The answer is yes. I mean, what we are doing with Azure AI Studio is moving all of these different individual studios into one place. And that includes Azure ML Studio, but it's also Speech Studio and Azure Document Intelligence, Vision Studio. We have a lot of them. Actually, I think there are like 12 or 14. And we're going to be bringing these all into one place. And the reasons for that, well, one of the reasons is so that you can use them all in one place. But another reason is to enable things like multimodality. So that when you use the playground, for example, that you can just use speech right there, that you can submit images or videos right there. And by the way, one of the things I forgot to mention earlier is that although today I just submitted images, and Seth Juarez did it also today in Scott Guthrie's keynote, if you attend the Azure AI Vision session tomorrow at 11:30, there, Thomasimo will be showing video also. So it's not just images, it can also be video.
That one's going to be really cool. Yeah, check that one out.
All right, folks over there, do we have any more questions on them? Oh, here it comes. Here it comes. When is GPT-4 Turbo available for Azure users? And that will become available, start to become available next week. So that'll be, what is that, November 20th, I think is the day.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, other questions? Okay. As for the voice generation, is there or will there be a way to add custom languages that are not natively included? I don't know. Well, I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, this was interesting. I think that we've thought a lot about this. I am not sure we have an exact plan to release this type of functionality, unless, Marco, you've heard.
Well, I mean, okay, so first of all, we should note that these voices already support like 140 languages.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 139, but it's close, right? So a number of languages and dialects are already covered by these voices. And last I checked, that covers about 76% of the spoken languages of the world's population. So most of the world's population is already covered by these spoken languages. And we continue to add more and more. Just recently, we added such languages as Bhojpuri and Maithili, which are two Indian languages. And we have nearly all the Indian languages now supported, for example. So we're continuing to add more and more support. You can add custom neural voices as well. But if we do see significant demand for other languages that we don't have coverage for, we certainly will consider adding them, because we can do that. All right, so we have another one here. And this one is from Farzad. It says, why is hybrid search better than vector search? And can you also do multi-vector search for RAG in Azure AI Search?
Yeah, so the demo that we were trying to show you was actually a combination, the last most powerful scenario we're trying to show you is a combination of hybrid plus semantic. And again, it goes back to this understanding. So hybrid search, as we've defined it in the product there, is vector plus keyword, right? And so I think it's this mapping that becomes really powerful. The hybrid plus semantic is now our default search for these pre-built solutions, where you can really get closer and closer to that NL is the new UI. So it's really, as the way that the models learn about how humans interact with each other, the search capabilities are keeping up and pushing things forward.
Yeah, I mean, concretely, I mean, you think about vector search, and like I said, vector search is concept search. And so when you have these documents, in many cases, the concept search is all you need. So the vector search, will match what you're looking for. The challenge arises when the concept itself is kind of distributed throughout. So for example, I had a Mercedes car manual. And in this Mercedes car manual, it didn't explicitly say how the car cools the engine. But the information about how the car cools the engine is actually spread throughout the manual. It says where the coolant system is and what to do if it goes bad and all those kinds of a thing. So when I use vector search and I ask it, how does the car cool the engine, it doesn't find a match because that concept is not concretely represented in the text. But when I do a hybrid search, so it's doing keyword semantic and vector, then it actually is able to find something. It finds these mentions of the coolant and the cool, and when it takes those chunks of the manual and it feeds them to GPT, GPT is able to stitch them together and produce a pretty reasonable representation of how the car cools itself. So that is a concrete way that hybrid search is better than vector search. Basically, it gives GPT more to chew on when you're setting up an application like this. All right. We have, and Pablo Castro, I understand, has a session tomorrow as well, where he will go into this much, much more deeply than I possibly could, than either of us could, I'm sure. All right. Aarthy, I think this one's going to be for you also, so I'll read it off. When you add Azure AI Search as a data source in Azure AI Studio, does it add the vector, keyword, and semantic indexes automatically when you add the data source? Or does your Azure AI Search index have to already have the data indexed in that way?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty easy. When you point in the playground, when you point the data and create that cognitive search index, you have the option of then selecting, do I want to enable vector search to this? So with one click, we make that really easy. And again, that's because we're moving towards supporting the hybrid and semantic as the default. So there's not anything special that you have to do in cognitive search to prepare your index or really worry about any of that. We chunk the data, it's good to go, and you should be able to start seeing the result of these powerful cognitive search capabilities out of the box.
All right, and late breaking news. I thought Pablo's session was tomorrow, but in fact, Pablo Castro's session, which is focusing on Azure AI Search, is later today, which must mean it's right after this. So after this, for those of you who have questions about Azure AI Search, formerly known as Azure Cognitive Search, please head over to Pablo's session, wherever that is, but I'm sure it's on the Ignite site. Oh, it's in here. Okay, well, it's in here then. Even better. If you have questions about search, stay where you are. Okay, so now we have another question from Frank. He says, as I understand it, Azure OpenAI will now be contained in Azure AI Studio. Well, I mean, the reality is that it will be for a while in both places. So Azure OpenAI has had for some time its own studio, its own little playground, and that is getting integrated into Azure AI Studio. So ultimately, yes, all of the Azure AI features will be rolled into Azure AI Studio. And again, the advantages of that, well, there are a number of them, right? The fact that the multimodality is right there, that you'll be able to use a single Azure resource to access all of these different things, from speech to vision to OpenAI to search, and the fact that these other tools like prompt flow and evaluation and content safety are all also right there, and you can use them all together. Well, with that, we are, oh wait, we got one more question here. One more question. Okay, one more question. So I'm going to lob this one at you, Aarthy.
Yeah.
What is the best way to collect and act on user experiences with chatbots?
Yeah, I think it said customer feedback.
Customer feedback.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. What is the best way to collect? Yeah, they pulled the question off the screen.
Yeah,
before I
went off the
finished
teleprompter. Yeah. So I'll take you back to the New York City example. So New York City came to us and said, how do we know, if our citizens are liking this? Like, what is their feedback? So we actually worked closely with them to first, leverage sort of the inbox tools that we have. We have a thumbs up, thumbs down, so simple signals of when you deploy this chatbot solution, where you can see metrics on overall, what is the percentage of these things, and is there are there strong signals around places where we could do better? And be able to look at that data by not only the overall rates, but also across different categories. So pulling this back into really being able to make good, interesting, informed decisions based off of simple feedback signals. But in addition, there are some customers that have asked us how we can craft the end user license agreement language to be able to, if the customer wants to give more direct pointed feedback on a particular response, then how do we do that? And also in places where they want to flag something as inappropriate, that there are systems and tools and documentation for customers to be able to do that easily.
Right, and going forward, as we mentioned at the beginning of the session, fine-tuning is about to become available on GPT-4. And one of the things you can use fine-tuning for is to bias the output of your model towards what your customers are looking for and away from what your customers thumbs down. And so that is one of the best uses of fine-tuning, in fact. All right, I think we have time to take just one more question here. So sorry for those of you who have been piling more and more questions on the screen, but we'll take one more lest we run out of time. And this last one is from Daniel K. It says, will Azure Studio, really Azure AI Studio, I'm sure, be able to support similar workflows to what we showed with UiPath? Well, yes and no. I mean, UiPath is an application that is specifically built to automate all of these different things. And UiPath, it's been around for a number of years, and it has these connectors to all these things, like, the Microsoft Edge browser, like ServiceNow, like Outlook. It has these connections pre-built because that's what they do. They are made for that kind of thing. Now, can you build these types of integrations yourself with Azure AI Studio, with the multimodal tools that we showed here? Absolutely you can. Yes, you could do that, right? Azure AI Studio is made for developers, and it's made for developers to be able to do whatever they can envision. But these tools, like UiPath, are pre-built and pre-integrated to automate those types of systems. And so, in general, it'll probably be faster to do that with something like UiPath than to go your own way. And with that, we are out of questions and out of time. So
thank you for being here, and do please keep up with us on those session resources.
Thank you all, and have a good Ignite.